love if you could tag us. We would love if you could tag us in your social feeds. Net Zero Bristol is our Twitter, and the hashtag Bristol's driving change. Finally, it is great for us to understand at which stage you're at in your journey to reduce your company's transport emissions. So please, can you all answer 2 questions, which is going to pop up on your screen. I'll just launch it now. So if you could all answer the question, that would be great. Any issues if you can't see the questions on your screen? Yep, I can see a couple of you. Yep, perfect. I'll just give you a few seconds to respond. Well, more than a few seconds to respond to that. Perfect. And I'll just hand over to, whilst that's still running, I'll hand over to Sally to do the next part.
Okay, hi everyone. I'm Sally Bennett. I'm content manager at Action Net Zero. I've got a background in communications and engagement, and I'm directly responsible for a lot of the content on our website, which is one of our platforms of guide and tools to help businesses and residents in Bristol make more sustainable transport choices. So as a little bit of a warm-up, bit of fun, we wanted you to just guess the number. So we've got 2 questions. The first question is, how many plug-in vehicles, hybrid and battery electric, are there registered in the UK, including this year to date? If you'll have a little think about that, put a number in a chat. I'll give you a minute or so. And we will give you the answer, obviously, afterwards.
We won't leave you hanging.
Thanks, Jessica, for being the first.
Yes. So Jessica's guessed 4,000, 200,000, 250,000, 165,000, 330, 200. Give you another. Oh, some very close answers here. Somebody's been, so these figures are taken from, the first one is from ZapMap and the second is from a statistics. Oh. Feel free to guess again, Jessica.
Yeah, we'll give you a second chance.
I'll give you one more minute.
Yeah. Okay, so Nikki, would you like to reveal the answer?
Yes, so the number of plug-in vehicles, so including hybrid and fully battery electric, there's 675,000 registered into the UK up to the end of October 2021. So some very close answers there. Maybe there was, yeah, this is, I guess, the split between some people maybe thinking just pure battery electric there. In 2018, there were 11,000 public charging points. There are now in 2020 just over.
Oh, we haven't asked for that one yet.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, so the second guess the number question that we have for you, as Nikki started to say, is so we want you to guess how many public charging points there were in 2020 for electric vehicles. So we've kind of given you a little bit of a clue or an indication, because in 2018 there were around 11,000. So you know that there would be at least 11,000. So yeah, next question then, if you have a little guess at the number for that. So how many public charging points were there for electric vehicles in 2020? Brilliant. I think we've got some close answers there as well.
Thank you, James.
Thanks, James. Great. So Nikki, do you want to reveal the answer?
Yes, I'm glad I didn't reveal it before. So yeah, Louise, just about on the nose there. So 20,694. But as we can see the statistics on ZapMap as well, that is increased very rapidly. So you can see the way that it's going in very quick time. So I thought we'd just highlight that.
Excellent.
Glad you enjoyed it. So moving on, I'm really delighted to welcome our speakers today. So we'll hear from Pam, who's the founder of Action Net Zero, and then followed by Robert Barnard-Weston, who is from Transform ESG. He'll be sharing his experiences supporting businesses to reduce their transport emissions. Then Tony Gregg from ALD will be outlining the cost benefits of moving from petrol and diesel vehicles to electric. And then Stuart from TLT will be giving an overview of TLT's new green leasing scheme and his personal experiences of the process. Then we will also be joined by Tom and from Right Charge, who'll give you an overview of how their product can help with you and your employees' transition to electric. Finally, we have Rebecca Burgess from Spherix, who'll be demonstrating their product to help your business measure, track, and communicate your net zero commitments. And there is also a special offer for all of you who have signed up today. So I shall now just quickly run through the agenda in terms of timing. So we have Pam coming up next, followed by the speakers and the demonstrations by Tom and Rebecca. And then we've got plenty of time allowed for questions. So please add in your questions to the chat as we go through, and so we can pose them to the speakers. And then we will sum up and close hopefully by 1:25. So that's that. And as I said, I shall now pass over to Pam Barbato, the founder of Action Net Zero, to introduce us and the Bristol's Driving Change campaign.
Thank you so much, Nikki and Sally, for that intro, and welcome everybody. Delighted to see you all here. I have got a few slides to go through, but I will keep it brief, and we'll be focusing on our speakers. So thank you for all of those to join us. Overall, for those that don't know you, Action Net Zero we started in 2020, and our focus and our mission is to support both businesses and residents to decarbonise. We're focused specifically at the moment on an initiative that is based around a decarbonisation of transport, as you know, because you're all here. And how we do that, as you can see, is we convene subject matter experts who are able to break down myths, to provide guidance and information on how best to be able to transition. And by doing that, we are able to then provide end-to-end solutions to our businesses or residents on a community level to help accelerate that transition. So that's our core focus and our mission. And as part of that, for us, it's about understanding how local ecosystems, so those ecosystems can actually start to accelerate that change by coming together. So collaboration is the way through networks that we're going to be able to accelerate change. Thank you, Nikki. Next one, Sally. So simplistically, the Bristol's Driving Change initiative that we're currently running is ahead of the Clean Air Zone next year. And as we said, this is about being able to provide that information on a community level. There's 4 key work streams that covers off. The first is about actually reach. How do we start to engage more fully about the salient and really critical points for change to our mainstream audiences, businesses and residents? So for us, we had an outdoor campaign that ran in the summer, which was focused on bus rears and also 6-sheet posters. That's about highlighting, as you can see, the key concepts, which is in 9 years' time, new petrol and diesel ICE cars will no longer be available. So it's about that engagement piece. We then have a website where we provide a plethora of information, guides and tools. And again, that's from our subject matter experts, but also from charities, from tech and tool providers, to bring all of those great examples of content and tools to help navigate the process. Specifically, we work through decarbonisation of transport, working through the transport hierarchy. So we've got everything from cycle to work scheme information. We've got everything about metro buses in the local area. We've got electric bike providers, e-cargo suppliers. So it's that, you know, what is that last mile freight consolidation about? So it's trying to be able to show the holistic piece around transport. And then, of course, as we know, we have many partners focusing on the importance of electric vehicles, both now and in the future, in terms of obviously decarbonisation, understanding how businesses can take advantage of those incentives that we know are there for the government, which aren't necessarily going to be there for forever. So supporting, as we said, businesses and residents on that journey by bringing together those subject matter experts. And then finally, we, underneath the surface, as you can imagine, there's a plethora of insight and data, and we're capturing that, not least about the actual switches that we're helping to support, but also the impact of those switches, which is quite an exciting stage. So our current partners, shining a light. So as we mentioned, we have key partners that provide end-to-end solutions. So if you're an organisation and you're thinking about decarbonisation, regardless of where you are on that journey, we believe we actually have some really supportive partners to be able to help that transition. And when we talk about decarbonisation of transport, specifically the switching to EVs as well, it's critical that we understand the importance between transport switches, them being powered by renewable energy, and that renewable energy being used in a smart way. So that's quite a complex conversation when we talk to businesses. Not all are aware of that. So for us, it's being able to, again, relate that relationship between an EV being powered at the right time with the right EV charger to make sure it's cost effective, and then smartly used so that we understand when we're able to utilize renewable energy from the grid. And also understand that cars have batteries, and in the future those batteries will act as storage, and that storage will be put to vehicle to grid, vehicle to home. So it's about being able to start to have those conversations and connect those, and we're doing that through our partners, as you can see, who range from Tony, he's here today to talk about total cost of ownership and fleet transition. Edwards is a large manufacturer focused on clean air and eradicating toxicity out of the air. We're doing some work with them. TLT Stewart's here as well, as a capacity from a legal perspective to help break down some of those barriers and share expertise. Tronics is a charging infrastructure provider for both home, a local council, and indeed businesses. Right Chargers, we've got Tom here today, first UK EV comparison site. Co-Charger, which is a very innovative app that enables you to share your charger with your local community to help break down the barriers of switching to EVs for those that don't currently have drives. And finally, of course, Good Energy, 100% renewable energy supplier who's able to support in terms of ensuring that the grid is decarbonised effectively to meet demand as we move forward. So hopefully that gives you a flavour of how we're approaching things. As I said, it's a circular economy model. But today, where we want to help and support, as we've described, is around understanding the impact that any business, large or small, can have in terms of focusing on their decarbonisation of their transport. So we've talked about all of the great important messages to employees around active travel, around public transport, the policies in place. But when we focus on actually then being able to support potential employees to switch to electric vehicles, that resides in kind of our scope 3. We also directly have fleet transition, as we've identified, helping to support scope 1. Renewable energy resides in scope 2. So really what we're really trying to say is here, by looking at fleet transition, EV charging infrastructure, engaging with employees, and also being able to switch to clean energy usage and use of, we're able to start to contribute to your decarbonisation process. So hopefully that's enough about Action Net Zero for the moment. Would like to focus on the great speakers that we have. So I'm delighted to welcome Robert Barnard-Weston, as he said, who is Director and co-founder of Transform ESG. Robert, would you like to give a little overview, and then we'll lead into the 3 questions that we're focusing on today?
Sure. So in brief, actually interestingly for today, when I moved out of being an ad agency copywriter and business development exec and demographics analyst back in the Middle Ages, it was in Bristol that I got my first opportunity to do what I then wanted to do, which in the late 80s was invent a career in what was going to become known as CSR consulting. And it started with Hewlett Packard in Bristol. Fast forward, it was triggered by my becoming a father. The baby who was born just after that just produced her first child last year and is pregnant currently with twins. And so I'm seeking to up my game. That's what Transform ESG is all about. Now I'm a grandfather. I've only got so many years left, and I'm seeing what I can do to increase the efficacy of my work, learning from mistakes we've made over the last 32 years, but also coming up with some new ideas and capitalizing on those created by others, as today. I'd say it's comms that drives much of the change. It's about what goes on between people's ears more than it is about the tech, but you really need both. And I'm sure we'll get lots of great information on both today.
Thank you, Robert. So to questions, our first question to you is that we're clearly focusing on decarbonising transport, specifically transition to electric vehicles today. But why do you think companies, individuals, regardless of size, actually need to act now?
I think actually there are two main reasons for that. And they are, one, it's nice to survive. Nick Stern, Lord Stern, as he became, wrote the Stern Report on climate change some years back now, and concluded in, paraphrasing, he concluded, this is either the biggest problem humanity's ever created for humanity or the biggest opportunity ever. I'd say it's both. If we want to survive, we better do this stuff. If we want to thrive and prosper, we better do this stuff.
Totally, thank you. And in terms of the next one, can you share with us some examples of where you've supported decarbonisation? I know you've worked for many organisations, again, large and small, and some are specifically around transport transition. Could you share some of those?
Yes, I mean, I know we haven't got all day, and Pam, you know I can talk all day, given half a chance. I'll keep it as brief as I can, but one example would be, funnily enough, the Hewlett Packard engagement. Way back, several decades ago in Bristol, the wonderful Dr. Simon Forsyth, we worked with him in Hewlett Packard, and he brilliantly just gathered a group of people within Hewlett Packard Bristol, all the way back then, and said, how can we change things? And one of the things we were delighted to see come out of that initiative was that he gathered a load of people together at the North Bristol site and said, why don't we start sharing our vehicles and have a car share scheme for getting into work here? And astonishingly, I mean, we've got Suscom on today, and that's a really important part of all that stuff. They were able to make such a massive change that Hewlett Packard HQ in the United States eventually came back to Simon and said, look, what you're doing in that and other areas, but I'm keeping to the transport related stuff here, is so good. We'd like you to pick a team and go global with this stuff. So they were way ahead of the game, and it all started with a car share scheme before we even had electric vehicles and other options, which we now have, of course, today. One other example would be, we were working with I'll name no names, but we were working with a very large construction company on a PFI public funding initiative hospital construction scheme. And when they asked us, okay, what would be your strategic advice on how we can improve our sustainability in this? One of the things I noticed after looking at the otherwise admirable architect's video of what we propose to do when we start construction on this £100 million project was when I said, I see a large site of tens of acres, and most of them seem to be car parking. I'm just wondering whether anybody's had a word with the local bus company and whether a win-win deal could be struck by means of which, a free bus trip can be made for, say, outpatients traveling to the hospital for appointments, thereby taking enormous numbers of cars off the road. Because it's not only about electrification, it's about changing the numbers of cars on the road, of course. And then, by the way, emissions will be cut. For every bus carrying 50 people, there are probably, 30 cars taken off the road. And thereby, costs for dealing with respiratory disease will be reduced for the NHS. And also, of course, fewer road accidents will leave fewer people needing repairing in the hospital. And they just sort of slapped their heads and said, oh my gosh, why didn't we think of this before? So I think, again, it's about what goes on between the ears as much as it is what goes on in the factories and the software developers' offices.
Yeah, it's a really great example there, Robert. Thank you. In terms of the connectivity, isn't it, between the clean air, obviously carbon reduction, and as you quite rightly said, we know virtually 50% of vehicle miles need to reduce in Bristol to hit 2030. So this isn't about, as you quite rightly say, a switch to vehicles, but I think for our focus here is as if we can engage businesses who have a higher need for those vehicles to switch now. That then allows us to be perhaps a bit more creative with the way we start to connect, as you quite rightly say, bus and transport methods, knowing that there's a modal shift available too. Brilliant, thank you. Again, Sally and Nikki, time-wise, are we? Yes, all right. So Robert, thank you so much. We've got a Q&A, so Robert, I'm sure we'll be answering some more questions soon, but we'll move on. Thanks, Robert.
Yes, thank you very much, Robert. And just a quick reminder for anyone who does have any questions, please feel free to add those to the chat and we will have some time at the end. So thanks again, Robert. Moving on, great to welcome Tony Gregg to our event today, who's an experienced business consultant for fleet transition, and I will let him introduce himself, I'm sure, a lot better. So Tony, if you are there, if you would be able to introduce yourself.
I'm not on mute, am I? Just check I'm not on mute. So.
Yeah, no, you're not on mute, you're perfect, great.
Hi, I'm Tony Gregg. I work for ALD Automotive based in Bristol. They're the largest leasing provider within Europe and the 5th largest within the UK with 150 vehicles on their books. I work as a fleet consultant within ALD Automotive. My specialism is decarbonisation or carbon reduction strategies for business in relation to fleet and the adoption of battery electric vehicles or the movement towards electric or alternative fuel vehicles, depending on the fleet profile. It's interesting to see with COP26 and environmental, social, corporate governance or ESG, how the conversation is shifting and companies coming to us wanting a greater understanding of carbon and their carbon impact in terms of scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 emissions in relation to their business delivery. And it's interesting times, and I think it's a lot of change going on. I think so. Next slide, please, Sally, I think. Okay, so I originally, I spent my formative years at the Energy Saving Trust doing carbon footprint analysis and, as I say, carbon reduction strategies. And we also were involved in what was called the Plugged In Fleet Initiative about 10, 15 years ago. And it's with all the vehicles we had to choose from in terms of looking where electric vehicles would sit and where they would work. Operationally was the Renault Twizy, the Zoe, the Me. There's very few cars to choose from, but now there's a wider choice. But in those years of dealing with all those fleets and the movement towards electric, no fleet ever really starts off at the same position. And unfortunately, there is no one size fits all policy in relation to battery electric vehicles, plugged in hybrid electric vehicles, or PHEVs as we call them. So since coming to ALD, we have developed what they call the ALD electric proposition, which offers a holistic and end-to-end approach. And within this is helps the powertrain shift for company cars. And within this is sort of 14 products, from carbon footprinting to driver surveys, to fleet policy reviews and driver training. So this suite of products should enable a smooth transition towards electric where possible. Be it with battery electric vehicles or BEVs, which best suits your driver profiles. This can be determined using telematics or driver surveys to ascertain which is most appropriate alternative vehicle, or understanding costs, which usually requires total cost of ownership, which I'll discuss later on, or TCO. And this analyzes against ICE vehicles and enables you to see where you can make cost savings against ICE vehicles in terms of battery electric vehicle adoption, or the operational requirements. If it is a working fleet, what are the operational requirements of the vehicle, and are there electric vehicles that will meet that requirement? And within that, we have blue fleet trials and try before you buy, which enable drivers or companies to put electric vehicles within fleet for a short period to see if they'll actually stack up and work for them at all. And then finally, we also have the understanding of the costs of charging, which is also important, not only for the driver, but also crucially for the business. As part of the ALD electric offering and the charging solution, we have what's called Charge Plus as one of its main offerings, which is an aggregation service, which provides a greater transparency of not only the cost of charging at home, but at work, but also the public network. So it also enables you to build a robust and intuitive reimbursement system across all three of these charging networks, which is obviously at the moment a unique and exciting offering. The next slide, please. So perhaps the biggest barrier to electric vehicle accessibility is the perceived cost. Invariably, the on-the-road cost of an electric vehicle is inherently higher than an ICE vehicle, which is a fuel injection vehicle, which is a petrol diesel model. And the FEV is more expensive using the petrol diesel model as well. So although battery prices are dropping rapidly, there's still a few years before battery electric vehicles will reach cost parity between diesel petrol models of vehicles. So the buying and running of a car is not just about the on-the-road cost. There are other factors involved, the vehicle excise duty, service and maintenance, the residual value, Class 1A NIC. Now, Class 1A NIC, if you provide a company car and it provides a benefit to your employee will have to pay benefit in kind tax, but your employer will also have to pay Class 1A NIC because they're providing a benefit for their drivers, so they have to pay a tax on that as well. So because of the low tax position on battery electric vehicles or BEVs, this means that the Class 1 NIC is inherently much lower than the on the left diesel petrol models. So what you can see on these pie charts, the TCO modelling is based on a basket of 15 vehicles for each category: ICE on the left, petrol diesel, plug-in hybrid electric vehicles in the middle, and battery electric vehicles on the right. And it shows where the most cost implications are. And as you can see on the right-hand side, the finance is the biggest part around the battery electric vehicle, because obviously it's inherently more expensive. So as you can imagine, the finance will cost more over the contract. However, you're paying much less in terms of the business of Class 1A NIC. So that's where you make major savings within your fleet over the life of the contract, and also the running costs as well. This is based on vehicles charging at home. So it's better to get an understanding of battery electric vehicles in terms of costing if you use a whole life cost approach, which is obviously the best way to approach provision of a policy. Next slide, please. Okay, as I previously stated, when we engage with a customer, there are different points of the journey within adoption of electric vehicles. With this customer, there were a 500 vehicle fleet. We have what we call our head office, the ALD mobility experience, which is an immersive virtual experience that enables customers to explore their policy, where they see weaknesses, where they can make cost savings. So they came to our Bristol head office in 2018, obviously pre-COVID, and it highlighted areas where they should really be looking towards, and it saw really gaps in terms of they were a wholly diesel policy. So within that pinpointed cost savings, you need to move towards electric to save in terms of NIC and cost savings around that and fuel savings. And they need to adopt a total cost of ownership in order to ensure that the plug-in hybrid electric vehicles would sit within those bandings, which they went away with. But we also said we need to look towards adopting battery electric vehicles, because we see that as, you know, the way forward, and it's the right way to go in the lower form of carbon fleet. The company agreed to the TCO modelling. However, they were unsure in terms of battery electric vehicles at that time, in terms of charging, the range issues, and would the drivers be able to carry out their daily day-to-day jobs operationally. So in order to give them reassurance, we carried out the telematics analysis of their fleet over the past 3 years. They did over 5 million business miles a year. So we analysed all the data over the years, and highlighted that 77% of the daily journeys carried out were less than 100 miles, and only 5% of the total journeys carried out, daily journeys, were more than 200 miles. This meant a vast majority of the drivers would go wholly electric. So it meant that if the battery electric vehicles chosen had a range of greater than 200 miles, and if the drivers were able to have home charging, they could charge their vehicles overnight and carry out their daily jobs without any impact in terms of carrying out their jobs. Off the back of the telematics findings, the company wanted to test the waters to see how the drivers would adapt to these vehicles and see if they were happy to use them. So we carried out what we call a blue fleet trial. So that what we put in 10 battery electric vehicles into their fleet with telematics. Some drivers had charge points installed at their homes, and that was monitored over a 6-month period, and they carried out about 50,000 miles within that period. This was a great project to run because it gave some great insights in terms of home charging, the effect of weather on the battery range, battery efficiency, the running costs, and the vital point of having a home charger in terms of if you're doing a daily mileage of more than 100 odd miles, 150 miles, then it was really, if you didn't have a home charger, it's really quite a difficult cultural change to actually adopt battery electric vehicles. The trial was positively received, and the company wanted to proceed with introducing battery electric vehicles into the fleet by early 2021. We produced for the customer a electric fleet policy, which included multiple powertrains, including battery electric vehicle, plug-in hybrid electric vehicle, and ICE. They used three manufacturers originally for their diesel policy, but for obviously battery electric vehicles, we had to widen that out because there wasn't that natural choice for the manufacturers. So that was launched earlier in 2021. Next slide, please. So we finally initially we provided the customer the carbon footprint baseline of where they were at in terms of their diesel fleet. And then we projected highly accelerated if they all adopted battery electric vehicles, if they adopted PHEVs. So we modeled different types of emission profiles in terms of their fleet. Their baseline was the baseline in terms of diesel was, so the diesel baseline was 700 tons. Sorry, that's not correct. Sorry, excuse me. So we finally provided the customer with the baseline, the carbon footprint, and then we projected accelerated and non-accelerated electric vehicle adoption. We launched the new policy, and we then reviewed the baseline based on the order bank April this year. And as you can see on the left-hand side of the pie chart, 50% of the vehicles were plug-in hybrid electric vehicles, and 48% were battery electric vehicles, and only 2% diesel. We then projected this to 2025, and if it continued along this line, they would make a saving of about 2,190 tons of CO2. We actually think this will actually be higher because obviously battery electric vehicles more and more will be coming on the market, the ranges will be longer, and the infrastructure will get better for charging on the network instead of just at home. I think we'd all agree we want to reduce our carbon footprint impact of our business, and I think inevitably we'll have to, but the vehicles have to stack up operationally and financially to really drive adoption within business fleets. That is what business consultancy ALD Automotive do and deal with on a day-to-day basis, taking on board the financial costs, the infrastructure challenges, and the wider operational requirements of our customers, and to provide any workable solutions to support businesses on the road to zero. And that's it. Thank you, Sally.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Tony. Great insights there for businesses there doing going through this fleet transition. We do have a couple of questions, but I will take a pause there and put them into the Q&A afterwards. So yeah, I will now hand over to Stuart Urquhart, who is Legal Director at TLT, to share his experiences of their new green leasing scheme. Over to you, Stuart.
Hi, Nikki, thanks for that. So yeah, I actually buried away on the Action Net Zero website is a little blog thing that I did back in July, and that kind of gives a bit more background on my personal circumstances. But long story short, my wife and I have been running a battery electric EV for about 3 years now, but we've still been running around on diesel in our for our main family car for longer journeys. And as I explained in my blog, one of the reasons for that is that we live in a mid-terrace house in Bristol. We don't have our own driveway or off-street parking. So some challenges about actually charging. But it's also fair to say that back in July when I wrote this blog, I hadn't yet properly investigated our newly launched EV leasing scheme, which is the main thing that I'm here to share some thoughts about today. So I don't know, Nikki, whether you wanted me just to continue giving some background on that, whether you wanted to kind of ask any questions specifically at this stage.
It's up to you. So if you would like to share the experience of the TLT green leasing scheme and the process and your experiences as an employee for that scheme.
Brilliant. Yeah. So the bottom line is that when I actually looked at, so from an employee perspective, when I actually looked at what kind of deals I could get through our scheme. So our scheme is a salary sacrifice based EV leasing scheme. And essentially I found, to my surprise, to be honest, that I could secure I could secure a brand new EV, a family sized EV on a budget that I thought would only stretch to getting something of that size second hand at some point in the fairly distant future, once those kind of cars have started to filter onto the market. And so, more specifically, for anyone here today that hasn't kind of investigated the potential benefits of this kind of scheme for employees, someone who wants to source a full battery electric vehicle with a notional zero emission rating, so as Tony was just explaining in his slides, something that has a very low benefit in kind tax rating, could potentially secure a lease deal at what is effectively more than a 30% discount to the full leasing price, or in fact, if you're a higher rate taxpayer, over 40%. And so, from my perspective, as an employee, that's a really compelling offer financially, especially when you then factor in the benefits of the significantly lower kind of running costs of EVs, which again others have already talked about. And although my own direct experience of this scheme is as an employee, I have also taken some soundings from colleagues of mine who've been involved in setting up our scheme. And I think, in short, it's fair to say that at TLT, we have genuinely found it a pretty straightforward experience to roll this out. There's a small cost in terms of an implementation fee that we have to pay to the company who's provided the scheme for us. And there is a bit of internal staff time, so checking order requests when they come through from staff, and then managing monthly lease payments. But genuinely, the sense from people I've been talking to is that it's not taking up huge amounts of their time, and that there's a lot of support and guidance available from the scheme provider, including with some important things such as what would happen if someone like me who was participating in the scheme then left the business. That one in particular was one that we wanted to kind of work through carefully before launching the scheme. But overall, my message, I suppose, today, principally from my own personal experience as an employee, but also sharing views from my colleagues from an employer perspective, really have a very positive view of this kind of scheme. And I think it really can play a pretty powerful role in encouraging people who are lucky enough to be able to take advantage of it in making the transition. I think it really is, as I said earlier, it's pretty compelling financially when you look at the detail.
Fantastic. And in terms of just finally, just for anyone here, is in terms of the kind of the first steps into exploring that? Is there anything that you would recommend?
The particular provider that we've engaged with has had a lot of experience of setting up these schemes for a number of organisations, maybe some others that are kind of represented on this in this event. So they've really been able to hold our hand all the way through. So we haven't had to do learning from scratch. The solution has essentially been presented to us. It's been thought through, as I said a minute ago. Some of the sort of questions that employers are naturally going to have about things like costs and some of the challenges of managing people who are on these leasing schemes. I mean, for us at TLT, it's been quite a big change. We have a sort of benefits package that all staff enjoy, but in terms of the amounts of money that are being kind of processed through this scheme, this is a significantly different sort of scale to any of the other benefits that we offer. But yeah, I think in terms of the kind of the journey, we've just found it that there's been a lot of information available from our scheme provider, and they've really been able to just kind of hold our hand all the way through.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Stuart. Great to get some insights from both the employer and employee perspective, and obviously help more business think about their emissions from a commuting perspective as well for all of their employees. So thank you very much for sharing that. We will we can share the blog that you also produced in our follow-up email as well, if anyone is interested in reading that. So thanks again, Stuart. Great. And thank you very much for all your questions so far. As I said, we will be doing a Q&A after all of the speakers, so please continue to ask them in the chat. But next up we have Tom from Right Charge. So he's here to share about their product and how it can help you, your employees and businesses. So over to Tom, who'll be sharing their product. Are you there, Tom? Yeah.
Sorry, I'm just trying to share my screen.
No problem. I don't know if Tom has dropped off.
Yeah, it looks like it. Should we go to Rebecca?
Yes, is that all right, Rebecca? Over to you. We'll see Tom might be experiencing some technical errors. So yeah, it'd be great if we could welcome Rebecca. She's here to introduce what Spherix does and how it can help your business to track and communicate your net zero commitment. So over to you, Rebecca.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for having me in this meeting today. It's great to see a lot of familiar faces, but also a lot of new faces. So I hope my presentation isn't going to be so dull to the ones that might have heard it before. I feel like I should have taken the note around being interactive as the meeting started. So I will definitely note that for next time. But for those that don't know, Spherix is a carbon accountability software that we've developed. We're a Bristol-based business and have been running for just over a year. We're based out of Future Leap. If any of you are, please come and say hi. And so I'm just going to spend the next 5 or so minutes talking to you about the products that we've got. And it's worth noting that we are approaching carbon accountability much more broader than just transport. So this is very much a tool for businesses to understand their carbon emissions and then set a strategy for reduction. It is very much targeted, it was built with small businesses in mind, understanding that the marketplace for those businesses to actually understand their carbon emissions was completely unfair and redundant. Small to medium-sized businesses cannot afford the very expensive consultancies, and it's also the marketplace was not as agile and timely as what a tech platform can provide. So we sort of say that we do three things on our software. So the first one, obviously, you'd hope to see is to measure your carbon emissions. The second is to mitigate. So how can we as a business help you mitigate the carbon emissions that you have, and make it really simple and easy to get the content and the information that you need in order to act. And then lastly, to manage. So not only is that to obviously continue understanding your carbon footprint, but also to report back to stakeholders and the like. So I'll just talk a little bit more about each one. And I guess the first point to say is that the tool very much works by connecting to your accountancy software. So I'm sure some of you on the call today use Xero or QuickBooks or Sage. We're also developing a spreadsheet upload function because we know that a lot of businesses don't even have that type of software. So we have that in the roadmap and launching imminently too. But the really interesting thing about Spherix is that it works on a hybrid model of data. So yes, the first sort of connection into Xero will calculate a course assessment of your carbon footprint. But what the platform also does is to ask the really critical questions in order to overlay those spend-based data analysis with actual sort of business impacts that you provided. So the likes of stating how many of your staff work from home, for example, which is relevant for this conversation, or indeed, if you know the exact fuel amount that your fleets are using, being able to put that exact data in rather than just using the spend-based data that we would have done through that initial connection. Our sort of calculation is all compliant with the greenhouse gas protocol. And the other really cool thing that I think is that we look at this from scope 3 first and foremost. So everything goes into the scope 3 bucket until you tell us otherwise. And it's through inputting that extra information into the platform that we start pulling out those scope 1s and 2s. So it very much is all 3 scopes and designed that way because we very much feel like scope 3 is very important. So after you've sort of measured your carbon emissions and hopefully put in lots of juicy detail into there to get a really rigorous data quality score, and I guess that's an important point, is you will get a average data quality score if you literally just connect and you don't engage with the platform, because it's not mandatory. You can literally connect and away you go. But the higher quality of data you give, the higher data quality score you have, which is also nice to know that there's something to inspire and aspire to. The second element is to mitigate and obviously to reduce your carbon emissions. And so that's looking at who are those top emitters that are coming out of your out of the footprint, and really targeting action strategies based on those. And we'll be able to provide those in really nice summaries. You can see sort of this is just a visual of the suppliers and how that's broken down. We also give industry trends and how you compare with others within your sector. And as we grow and develop as a business, we are very much going to be taking a sector by sector approach, because we know that the strategies for construction will be incredibly different to that of the media industry, for example. But that gives you the next step in the mitigation strategies on the roadmap, there is also the ability to have more connected survey-based data. So really relevant for this audience is a commuter survey, a transport survey, a fuel survey, trying to get more and more content and data into the platform to give you a better overview of where you stand. And then, going on to managing that. So you're able to set a target within the platform. We obviously would love to see loads of commitments for net zero by 2030, and it will map out how you get there. And it will also be able to pull those reports so that you can share it with your stakeholders. And we're getting some amazing traction. So we're part of the Net Tech Nation net zero cohort, which is an amazing array of 30 or so national companies making a difference in green tech. We've won some awards. We're part of the Innovate UK programme thanks to some UKRI funding. And we're now, as of a few weeks ago, able to take paid customers. It's a subscription-based model. We're very much pitching it at sort of a Netflix price, and really keen on seeing you all take sort of the first step, if you haven't already, to understand those carbon emissions. So today, we're offering 3 months free subscription to all delegates, and you can get a nice little demo from our awesome customer service team, and go from there. So I really hope to see you. I'll pop the link into the chat, and I look forward to your questions.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Rebecca, for jumping in there. Hopefully we've now also got Tom back, and Sally, the slides should be ready to share as well. So thanks again, Rebecca. That's great. Hopefully you've got loads of questions to hold on to there for the Q&A section after Tom. So over to you, Tom, if you're good to go now.
Yeah, perfect. I think second time lucky, hopefully. I'm just struggling to see the shared screen.
Sorry. There we go.
There we go. Perfect. Hi guys. My name is Tom. I'm product manager at Right Charge. Maybe if we just go straight into it. Next slide, please. Perfect. So essentially, it's a really brief deck today, just sort of going through some key points of who we are, workplace charging, how to charge your car at home, and maybe a little site demo at the end, just to give you some practical how-tos to get a charge point installed. Next slide, please. Perfect. So who are Right Charge? Right Charge are the UK's only charge point comparison service, and the only tariff comparison service that works for electric car drivers, considering the car as well as your home. So a little bit about me as well. So I've studied mechanical engineering at Leeds. I spent 3 years specialising in internal combustion engines. And then at the end of my degree, I thought, this isn't for me, and tried to switch to a more moral job, which is why I'm working for Right Charge. We have the largest installer partnership network with over 50 regional installers. And as of today, we've completed over 500 home charge point installations. Next slide, please. So we're going to break it down into sort of 2 main categories, charging at your workplace and charging at your home. We run a very, very sort of rudimentary workplace charging system where we can help connect basically yourselves to a verified installer who will basically take you through the entire process themselves. But maybe some prerequisite stuff to start to think about is basically break it down into 3 key points. Firstly, where do you want them installed? For most of you, this will be an obvious question. But maybe there's multiple options for you. And you've got to consider where your fuse box is, and especially in commercial units as well. This may be slightly complex, but a good rule of thumb is to basically match the electricity supply with where you want the charge points installed. So make them as close as possible, as this will remove any unnecessary wiring and major infrastructure changes. Secondly, how many do you want? Normally for, a small business, this can be limited to one charge point. But many sort of workplace charge points are dual socketed. So you can have 2 sockets for one charge point. You're probably seeing these in many sort of like public car parks. But this is brilliant because the workplace charging scheme offers £350 off each socket. So in fact, you can get a £700 reduction for each charger if it's dual socketed by this scheme. And that is applicable up to 40 sockets, which is, pretty amazing considering, how mainstream EV charging at the workplace is getting. And thirdly, a big one is who will pay for the energy. So if you're looking for a really simple installation, then you'll be paying for all of the energy usage. But say if you want employees to pay for their own energy, or you want to make it available to the public to charge, and you could charge the public to charge at your workplace, then that's also an option. But those are sort of the 3 key points. After that, we'll get in sort of the installation process holistically, and just to run you through it. But those are sort of the 3 key points before even jumping the gun and talking to an installer you should definitely think about. Next slide, please. Perfect. So covering another topic. So we talked about workplace charging. Next, we'll talk about charging at your home. For some of you, this is probably quite a strange topic because you're a business and you want to install charge points, but actually your employees charging at home is imperative for you to reduce your carbon footprint. Because I've broken it down into 3 points again, recurring theme. But firstly, it's way greener if your employees charge their car at home than at work, because you can charge your car at off-peak periods during the day, which are mostly at night, and when energy generation is the cleanest. So that is normally between midnight and 6 a.m. Whereas at work, even though it's lower than the peak period, which is 4 to 8 p.m., you're still the energy is going to be way dirtier than if it was during the depths of night. Secondly, it's way cheaper as well. So charging at home, you can access special tariffs offered by Octopus and EDF, which specialize in EV drivers. So if you have access to the tariff, which offers really cheap overnight rates, then you could easily save £250 annually if you use your car for 25,000 miles a year. And also convenience. The problem is, if you're a salesman going around the country all day, then, you don't have time to spend an hour at a charge point. So when you get home at night, if you charge your car after full charge every night, then it's going to be as convenient as a petrol car. So we've sort of covered, why to charge at home, but, how does that actually work? What are the processes involved? I've actually broken down some of the lingo as well we've mentioned here. So first of all, you've got to choose your charger. So there's loads on the market currently, and we'll get into sort of specifics on that later, but you've got to choose a charger which works for you. There's like over 25 different charge points for the home on the market. Some are better than others, and some target certain customers. So once you've chosen your charger, the second stage is to complete a survey. This term is thrown about a lot in the industry. All it is like a few images of your home. that allows an installer to provide you a price for the installation. This is what we call a quote. All it is a final price. Once you're happy with the quote, you can go through with an installation. So you ring your installer up and they'll book a date of installation. And then it should take about half a day because it's quite a big job for the home. There's a lot of rewiring which needs to be done, and a few drilling, a few holes as well. But once you've got your charger, then you need to think about that switching tariff. Home charging and having a EV tariff goes hand in hand. You can't have one without the other, really. If you want to see the financial benefit. Before the energy crisis, you could charge your car for 5p per kilowatt hour, which is incredibly cheap compared to public charging, which, on average is about 22p per kilowatt hour. So you're saving, it's almost just a quarter of your charging bill if you are charging at a public charger. Perfect. I think that's covered a lot there, but yeah, just a quick one on the pricing as well. So for a home charger, there's also another grant similar to the one for the workplace, which is the WCS grant. It's of 350 £350. And normally that means your full installation price will be between £600 and £1,000 for a home charger. So you can easily see a return of investment in under 4 years for a home charger, even if it's not through a company. Perfect. Next slide, please. Lovely stuff.
I think, Tom, if we leave the slide, I'm just conscious of time, but I think thank you so much for sharing really great practical insights and step-by-step process. So hopefully loads of takeaways for everyone. So thank you very much, Tom. So moving on to the Q&A section, for any of our speakers, we have some questions already that have been asked in the chat, so I shall start with those, but feel free to add any more as we go through. So we've got around 10-15 minutes for questions. So the place that I want to start is actually with directed more towards Tony, I believe. So there was one question, Tony, in the chat, and it was related to the time period for the illustrations. So if you could just confirm that for the audience, that would be great.
I presume they mean the total cost of ownership. It's based on 36 months, 60,000 miles, so 20,000 miles per annum, which is a pretty standard business contract for leasing vehicles, really.
Perfect. Thank you for clarifying that. I wanted to ask there's quite a few on sign up where people were talking about how to kind of justify the transition to fleet managers or how to engage them. I wondered if you had any experience or any insights in how to go about that.
Well, invariably, there's a few fronts you need to build your case upon. It's whether it delivers operationally, which obviously is a primary concern for a business, but also does it deliver financially in terms of savings? And as I said, the total cost of ownership really does highlight where savings can be made moving towards battery electric vehicle. There can be some really big savings in terms of Class 1A NIC, as I've said, and obviously running costs if they're charging at home or at the depot, and you actively address your cost of electricity, then you can really make some big savings there. But I think as well, the way things are going, I think, that the sort of the monetization of carbon will inevitably lead to businesses having to adopt a lower carbon approach, because it just won't be financially viable for them, and people won't invest in them if they don't adopt, an active approach in terms of reducing their business impact on in terms of carbon emissions.
Perfect, thank you. And I'll just stay with you just because there was another question in the chat that seemed fairly short to address, which was around looking at smaller fleets. So this might be relevant for people here thinking, so Leanne has asked, because her fleet is only 11 LCVs. Yep. So yeah, any insights for Leanne?
The LCV proposition is much more difficult, well, more difficult than cars. I think there are a lot of things you need to think about. Businesses obviously have different practices, and if they have back to depot or if they have back home, that can influence things. You know, if they can't, and the drivers don't have a driveway, how do they actually charge their vans? And then if they have to use a public network, which is inevitably is more expensive, the total cost of ownership, the savings start to deplete. But obviously with Bristol having a clean air zone, that can also impact your van fleet in terms of depending on what emission profile it is. There are a lot of variables in terms of, but there is no reason why a small, 11 van fleet or 15 van fleet can't make big savings in terms of fuel cost, and in terms of if they're moving into clean air zones. But I'm quite happy to, if she wants to contact me and talk about it, because obviously it'll be different for her fleet than it is for any other van fleet, as if they have a depot that can help, as I say, or if the drivers don't have driveways, how do you go around that? But there's all different things you need to think about in terms of a van fleet, which is a lot different drivers in terms of the company car, which is obviously is influenced by the tax, corporation tax that drivers have to pay, or business benefit in kind tax.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Tony, for answering that. We just had a question from Ian as well. So I don't know if this is one for somebody in particular, so I'll just open it up to the floor. But he is interested in hearing if any providers are helping access the tax breaks for domestic charger installation and charging near the workplace. So it's kind of similar to the salary sacrifice idea, but based on flexible benefits or benefits sacrifice for those EVs through their company. Opening up to the floor, would anyone be able to, I don't know if it's Tony or someone else, over to.
Might be worth mentioning, we put a charger in almost 10 years ago. We had an eco hotel in Bath, which we just recently sold. But one of the other ways to benefit from doing that, we found, was to use that in our marketing, because we offered free charging for EV drivers who then booked into the hotel and also went and took lunch in one of our other companies in the centre of Bath. And there are lots of benefits also that can spin out from doing this, as well as the immediate benefits in terms of tax breaks and so on.
Thank you, Robert. Thanks. Tony, did you want to add anything? Or?
Yeah, I mean, we don't currently offer a CellSAC product, but we'll be hopefully soon. But in terms of the home charging, I think people have to be aware that the home grant charging is changing from next year, in terms of by the end of March, it's shifting over towards landlords and leaseholders, so that they can get the 350 grant off the charge point. So if you're looking to move towards electric, then you really need to think about, if you want a discounted home charger with the grant, then you need to get it registered and installed, obviously before the end of March next year.
Can I add on that as well, just picking up on Tony, we've talked about the incentives that government are giving. Charging grant, as Tony's just said, is coming to an end in March, I believe, next year. Tony, correct me if that's wrong. But also to highlight that the tax incentives relating to salary sacrifice schemes currently only go up to 2024, and after that there's no assurances at the moment that they will continue. So again, really about the imperative of seizing the opportunity now and making the most of those incentives, because if you're obviously a fleet, you'll have I would suggest, Tony, again, a 2-year cycle minimum, I would have thought. So
minimum 2-year cycle up to 5 years, yeah.
So even if you're only going to adopt that next year, you've only got one cycle before the tax incentives might change. So yeah, another reason to reach out and act now, I would suggest.
Oh, sorry, just to jump in more broadly on transport and initiatives, but if you haven't checked out Climate Perks, They are doing amazing stuff, incentivizing staff to travel more slowly. So instead of flights, and I presume you can also make the case, because you can write your own policy through that, around opting to car share and lots of things. So that's just a shout out for another amazing organisation doing amazing stuff.
Thanks, Rebecca. And we do have another couple of questions. So I've got one from James, and I wondered, and also one from Rachel from earlier. I wondered if either of you, Rachel or James, would like to come off mute and ask your question directly to the speakers.
Hi guys, yeah, so my company provide electric vehicle chargers in our car park that for years staff members have been able to use when we drive into work. I'm assuming that's going to become more and more common as more companies want to do that for their staff. But are there tax implications for that for companies that are considering offering electric vehicle charging points for their staff members to use for their private vehicles? So like not company cars.
And
it is a grey area, but I think there are tax implications in terms of private vehicles, I think. But if it's a company car, then no, there's no tax implications.
Thank you.
Great, thanks. And then Rachel from earlier, I think you were asking if you're still here to around interested in hiring vehicle, offering electric vans, if anyone knows of any they don't lease.
Yes, I'm still here.
Okay, great, thanks Rachel.
Right, we're a very small project management construction business, and we've got a very small fleet which is all electric, I'm happy to say, at the moment, but outside of that, for site work we hire vehicles, and this year in particular, sadly, our usage of has gone up because we haven't been able to fly. We've done a lot of work in Scotland, a lot of work in Ireland, which we might have otherwise flown, which is probably better that we were driving, but not ideal. But obviously we need vans, and I've been looking for electric van hire, and I'm sort of, it's very limited. Most of the sort of providers that we usually use are have maybe one or two electric vehicles, but they're not vans and they're not substantial. So that's just something I want to start looking into. I wondered if anybody had any suggestions of companies I could head towards, really.
The only one that I can suggest in terms of vans might be Enterprise, but again, it's not my kind of area of expertise, but I know that they have a wide selection. Tony, do you know any more?
Yeah, well, we do have our Flex offering, but the issue is supply again at the moment with the semiconductor issue. The supply has been really poor, so we're struggling ourselves in terms of getting hold of some vans, electric, especially electric, because obviously we want to provide it for more customers so they can try it out, see if it works for them or not, and then obviously you guys have done it, you're ahead of the curve, and you can do it, but for some it's, there are issues around it, but we're really struggling to get stock, as it were, at the moment, and a lot of leasing companies are in a very similar position because the manufacturers just aren't supplying at the moment because of the semiconductor issue, I'm afraid. So you might struggle, I'm afraid.
Okay, well, we'll keep looking.
Yeah, well, I'll get your details and I'll have a look, keep asking around for you if I can find anything.
That'd be great, thank you.
No problem.
Thanks, Rachel, for your question. I've actually got Nina. Nina, I don't know if you wanted to ask it or if I should read it out. Maybe she's not there. I shall read it out then. So, oh, you're there.
I'm doing it off my phone. If you can read it out, that'd be great.
Okay, perfect. Yes.
Thank you.
So maybe I don't know if Stuart is aware of this or if anyone else does, but if a member of staff charges a company car at home, who pays for the electricity and how do they expense it? Would that be something, Stuart, you could answer?
I probably can't answer that one, I'm afraid, Nikki, unhelpfully, because it's not something that we're doing currently. Yeah, I don't know. I anticipate Tony probably has a view, as he does on most of these questions. So there
are ways of doing it. If you have a car and you're on business and you travel business mileage, you can claim back your mileage at what they call AFR rates by the HMRC. They're currently set at 4 pence per mile for electric vehicles, which is inadequate as we're concerned, and we are lobbying HMRC to change their viewpoint, and I think that's being reviewed next year, hopefully. So that's one way of doing it. So the company should at least reimburse you at 4 pence per mile. It's quite difficult, as with that's why we launched a Charge Plus product in terms of your home charging, using your charge point. How do you claim that back through the business? Some businesses you can actually from your charge point, if it's a smart charger, download the usage, and then if you record your business personal mileage and then submit that to the business then can reimburse you as a percentage of, say you do 100 miles in a month. If you do 75 business, 25 personal, then they'll reimburse you back 75% of the bill, say. But it just depends on the size of your fleet. If you've got a large fleet, then that's quite an onerous thing to do. But if it's a small company fleet, they should be able to handle that, really. Does that answer the question?
I think it does. And also very helpfully, thank you, Ian and Anne. They've both, well, Ian has included oh yeah, Nina said yes, and Ian's included a link, which is great. Thank you very much, Ian. And Anne, actually, to Rachel's point earlier around electric vans, very excitingly, Anne has posted some details over something upcoming, very exciting. So yeah, I think in terms of timing, we'll leave the questions there, but we will be guided actually by the questions that have come through, and on our website we do already have lots of information, but actually in reference to some of these questions we may well include more details and in answers to your questions so that you can refer back to them. So thank you very much for all of your questions, very, very great to see. And so just finally to sum up today, I would love to, for anyone here, after hearing all of the fantastic information from our speakers, and I would love in the chat for everyone here to pledge to one thing today, that they will put down the intention today and what they want to do in the next 6 to 9 months around decarbonising your transport in your company. So I would love if you could add, and some examples maybe could be set up a cycle to work scheme, thinking about, if you haven't already, add cycle racks or showers for your employees. And to kind of Tony's presentation, you could look at the total cost of ownership for your business and make sure that you're taking advantage of all the current incentives. Or maybe you could commit to kind of pledge to engage with your staff, maybe set up a meeting to talk through the transport hierarchy and the benefits for your employees and how to get that in place. So I would love it if you could add to the chat now a kind of pledge that you want to do in your business. That'd be great. Thank you. And then, so in terms of what we are, we'd love to follow your journey and your company's journey and how you get on. So if you have something to share, then do let us know by emailing the email address info@actionnetzero.org. And we'd love to feature you everyone as one of our pioneering change makers, or what we're calling our transformers. So love to hear from you. And just finally, before we leave, I would, and also spread the message and inspire others by tagging us on Net Zero Bristol with the hashtag Bristol's Driving Change. And then just finally, before you go, it'd be great if you could fill out a couple of questions on the poll, which is going to pop up on your screen again. And just to remind you, we will be sending over the recording of the session with a follow-up email with more resources and any links that have been shared. So just before we sign off, I would just ask you to launch a poll, and if you just answer the questions that pop up on your screen now. I can see a few answers, so yes, I'll just give you a few minutes to respond to that. We're really grateful to get to your responses, to understand how how much you've gained from the session and how you'll use it in the future. Great, and while you're the rest of you are finishing those questions, I'll just hand back to Pam to finish off.
Thank you, Nikki. So really say thanks very much for attending. I hope you found it useful. I mean, I think the one thing, listening to everybody and focusing on the questions that come through, is we know that every situation is complex, that there aren't always the answers that we'd like, that progress is rapid in terms of decarbonisation, specifically electric vehicle uptake, for all the great reasons. But as Tony has already identified, there are some supply issues, which actually means that managing people's expectations is yet another challenge that we all need to face. But hopefully some of the key barriers to transitioning regarding obviously price and vehicle type and processes and complexity, hopefully we've addressed a few of those today, as well as obviously heard about the great apps and the Spherics and obviously Right to Charge. If there's any questions that anyone has got following on, please do reach out to us. We are here through our network to be able to support, and that's something that we'll address and get back to you wherever we can. And thank you very much again to our speakers, so to Robert, to Stuart, to Tony, Rebecca and to Tom for joining us today and supporting Action Net Zero for the event. Thank you all.
Well done, you guys.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Cheerio.
Thank you.
Anna Driscoll.